You've made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession. This week's episode is brought to you by Imaging Services, ChiroThin, Chiro Moguls, Mahalo Wellness, McCaffrey's Clinical Mentoring, Local Gold, Chiro Health USA, The Goodman Factor, Chiropractic Rocks, Winner's Edge, Accident Records, Chiro Tax Pro, Full Script, your online dispensary, and Digital Hustle. Let's hustle!
So I have Dr. Brett Jones coming in here with an exclusive interview. You're coming in from the California area, Oakland area, and I'm out here in Grand Junction, which is on the western slope of Colorado, which I was talking to Brett pre-interview. It's like I moved out here because no one lived here. And, some of the things that are happening out with you guys in California aren't as present for me here in Grand Junction. So I know we're going to touch on some heavy topics today, but topics that need to be discussed. One of them is racism and chiropractic. And one of the tenets of Chiro Hustle has always been to keep free speech alive and well in the chiropractic profession, not just discussing insurance cases and cash practice and, subluxation versus non-subluxation. But I think today we're going to be able to talk about some topics that everybody needs to be apprised to. And they're topics that are hitting home to some of our chiropractic brothers and sisters. And I just wanted to be a vessel of truth today for some messages that Dr. Brett Jones is going to share today. So Brett, welcome to Chiro Hustle Live.
Thanks for having me again, man. I think it's my third time on Chiro Hustle. But, I think it's been a couple years since I've been on, so it's good to be back.
Yeah, we've been rocking. We're hitting some really cool targets with what we're doing. And one of those things I wanted to do with these exclusives is to share some truth in the chiropractic space, but it's also a global truth. And there's some things that we can talk about in our niche area, which is Chiro. But this is like stuff that has a latitude within all culture and what we're all going through right now. And I think that our nation is heaving right now with division, and we need to start talking about topics that people are maybe afraid to touch on. So let's jump on the first conversation here with each other and talk about racism and chiropractic. I know I was watching a post that you made with a popular chiropractic group, and I saw what was kind of being shared back and forth, and no one really wanted to come to terms with what the real truth was. And it got a lot of attention, and I didn't comment or post. A lot of times people watch my stuff and they don't comment or post. They just kind of are the silent watchers. So that's kind of how I played that whole thing. But as I started seeing that unfold, I was like, well, let's give the other side of voice. Let's give the people that might feel oppression and might feel disenfranchised into the opportunity to be heard. So let's talk about that, man.
Yeah, one, I don't feel oppressed or disenfranchised, but I will bring up the history of chiropractic and racism and white supremacy that has been basically a part of the birth of the United States of America. So with that said, and also I want to bring up the point of division. The division has been rampant in the chiropractic profession since basically its origin, starting like in the early 1900s, when you had the first split of the different schools starting. I believe the first school outside of Palmer was National. I could be wrong, but where that's kind of like where you had the break moving from just the strict principled straight chiropractic to people that wanted to offer a little bit more of what would be kind of like bringing in some naturopathy, talking a little bit more about health and nutrition and movement and those components. And then from there, I mean, you had the birth of the ICA and birth of the ACA and how those have been in battle. And then the birth of the mechanistic and the vitalistic chiropractic, and those have been in battle. And we see this in the two-party bipartisan system within our political system. So division has been a part of the dualistic reality of consciousness that we are all playing a part in. The move that needs to happen is actually a move for unity. However, when people hear unity, they only want to talk about unity and not talk about the differences. So we're used to only, really having two sides of something and experiencing those two sides at war, right? it's possible to have two sides or two polarities of something, acknowledging each other's differences and still choosing to come together. You can't bypass the acknowledging the differences, especially when we've had one side of this historically oppress, right, and discriminate and have injustice against one specific, you don't even have to say race, but really a color of a skin. Racism is anti-blackness, right? Racism is anti-blackness. And I did a long video on this called the Racism in Chiropractic that launched almost 2 weeks ago now. It's on YouTube, it's on Facebook, it's on Instagram. And what I go into is it was actually in Spain in the 1420s is when you first had the concept of identifying somebody and the first discriminatory laws that were set really as tax laws to tax what they called the converseros, which was basically this massive, I don't want to say transformation, but basically where they took a large group of Jewish people and converted them into Christianity and I don't know if it's Christianity or Catholicism, and then wanted to be able to tax those people for not being, pure blood, basically. And so there's this first tax law that comes into 1420s. And prior to that, you were never classified, again, based on the color of your skin. You would be identified by region, right? So this group of people, were from wherever the hell ever. And then, or you were identified by a religion that you identified with. So potentially you were Protestant, right? Or you were Catholic, or you were whatever, but you were never classified by the color of your skin. So race was never used in the color of skin until these discriminatory laws came forth as a way of looting. Isn't that interesting? As a way of looting and taxing this specific set of people. And that then set up a framework, which then they started using this word called limpizia. I think it's something in that limpizia or something like that, which brought in this concept of the mixing of the blood, that if you were to mix the blood, right, of somebody that was pure blood, and you could consider that at the time it was more Christian pure blood, but then it started to go into white pure blood, that you would taint it. And if you tainted it, it was less holy, it was more diseased, it was sick, and all of this. And they used this concept in the setting up of African slave trade, right? And so slaves or the enslaved started getting shipped to the Americas starting in the late 1400s. So when you hear about the first arrival of the enslaved to America being 1619, that was one of the first English settlements. However, it's estimated that there was like close to 700,000 Africans that had been shipped to the Americas prior to reaching Jamestown, Virginia, which is the first English settlement in 1619. Now, the importance of knowing some of this is knowing that, one, the United States is set up in white supremacy, right? So if you actually go and to look at the first original legal definition of United States citizen, it was granting citizenship only to white people. Not of the Aboriginal people or anybody from Africa. I can actually just read to you what the actual definition was. This is set up, I believe, in 1856. You can still get it. If you get Legal Dictionary by Farlex, Farlex, you can find original definitions. And so you just type in the word citizen, you can pull up the definition. So on Article 3, it says all natives are not citizens of the United States. The descendants of the Aborigines and those of African origin are not entitled to the right of citizens. Anterior to the adoption of the Constitution of the United States, each state had the right to make citizens of such persons as it pleased. That Constitution does not authorize any but white persons to become citizens of the United States, and it must therefore be presumed that no one is a citizen who is not white. And that came forth and published, 1856. For those that know their history, 1776 is when the United States celebrates Independence Day, when it became its own sovereign nation. 1863 is when you had the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment. But following the 13th Amendment, so basically for those that also like math, from 1619 right, to 1863 was slavery, right? That's 244 years. And I was having this conversation because people like miss this. So Jim, if I say, tell me about the 60s, right? You might think a couple different music genres, right? You might start to see, some attire, some clothes that they would wear, right? That was common in the 60s. Some potential, big things that were happening in the 60s. If I say 50s, your mind changes. Now you're thinking some of those, cool ass 50s cars, right? The 55 Chevy, and you're thinking some of that music. Now maybe now you're starting to see, you had those where you what do you call it? The jukebox, right? You're seeing the jukebox, you're seeing the milkshakes, you're seeing, maybe the tighter jeans and the white t-shirts, the greasers, right? You're seeing some of that, you get some of the imagery, you say, okay, then maybe go back to the 20s, you're thinking, okay, roaring 20s and prohibition and some of the things that were happening in the 20s and Great Depression. And so you can go through decades, right? And those were moments in time, right? Where you can, recollect kind of some of what was happening during those time periods. And you could probably do that through the majority of the 1900s. I want you to think about this. When we say slavery, 1619, think about 1620s, 1630s, 1640s, 1650s, 1660s, 1670s, 1618, 1690, 1700, 1710, 1720, 1730, 1740, 1750, 1760, 1770, 1780, 1790, 1800, 1810, 1820, 1830. That's a long fucking time. 1840, 1850, 1860. 244 years in the English settlement and then becoming the United States of slavery. Not to mention that when the 1863, you have this, 13th Amendment. In that amendment, it said all slaves are free. And then it gave a clause, unless the criminal clause, right? And so what you ended up with, it was this big transfer from moving from slavery, because basically, by the way, the South specifically built their entire economy on free labor, right? The U.S. strength and economy was built on free labor. Now you free all these people. The cotton industry doesn't make sense. The textile industry doesn't make sense because you're used to benefiting, profiting, building industry, building economy from free slave labor. So what they found a way for was labor contracts, right? So again, there's accounts, right, of the enslaved not even knowing they were free until like the 1950s. Because what you had, again, times are different now, right? We have the internet now, we have multiple news publications, we have phones, we have radio, we have all these things. In 1863, I don't think radio came out until early 1900s. So again, all they knew was the land, right? And, back when you had slave laws, you weren't allowed to leave the land. You weren't allowed to travel at night. You weren't allowed to often marry even people that were on the same plantation. You weren't allowed to read. You weren't allowed, could be punished by death with no harm to the slave owner. And so following 1863, you have Jim Crow laws, also known as the Black Codes or Black Laws, which, and then also the criminalization of Black people. Right. So when you see a lot of the things that you see now in regards to stereotypes, that was set up by white supremacy. Right. So there's a movie that came out in 1915 called Birth of a Nation. And this is one of, the most controversial movies made in America of all time. And in that movie, what they depicted was Black males played by white actors in blackface, who were rapists, right? Who were violent, who were murderers, that were savages. And then what you see is the glorification of the KKK, right? And so basically what they did is they shifted the attention on criminalizing and painting the picture through motion picture, which is, as we're finding out, media is one of the most motivating methods of changing and altering behavior. We're all seeing it now with coronavirus, and now moving into another phase. And so one of the largest motion pictures of that era was this Birth of a Nation. And then again, making out Black people to be savages, murderers, and rapists, Black men. And then often criminalizing Black people for next to nothing, by the way, as a way to then keep them enslaved, right? And so even to this day, you can say that the penitentiary is the modern day enslavement, because it disproportionately affects mainly Black males, but the Black population. And you can detail different accounts of when the war on drugs came in and why it was 100 times the sentence for having crack cocaine versus cocaine, even though it's similar. Crack cocaine is often a diluted and chemically altered version of cocaine. Cocaine would be more pure, but they planted crack cocaine in Black populations, creating an epidemic, and then sentencing them 100 times the sentence for most of the white areas having cocaine. So there's been a lot of historical things that have come through that have, one, just within the United States of America, that has kept an uneven playing field for people of color, primarily Black people. And the interesting thing here is it's within the chiropractic profession too, and nobody's wanted to acknowledge it. Chiropractic profession was also set up in white supremacy. You say, well, how is that? Well, it wasn't until so actually, I just this week, somebody said it wasn't even until later, but I have, from the ABCA and from some Palmer historians saying that the first Black graduate to graduate the PSC was 1956, Dr. Stanley Dale, right? That means, and when I say that, it's not because that was the first one that was attended. That was the first one that was allowed to attend, right? So basically, it wasn't until 1954-ish, maybe 1953, that a Black student was allowed to attend Palmer School of Chiropractic, the PSC. And what's good to know is, yes, there was Brown versus Board of Education that happened in 1954, which basically allowed for a desegregation and inclusion of Black people in white schools. However, Palmer was not a public school. That ruling was for public schools. Palmer could have been admitting Black people from its origin in 1895. That's why you had medical schools starting as early as 1846 having graduates, Black graduates. But we didn't have a first Black graduate until 1956 from the PSC. Why is that important? Basically, up into the 50s and 60s, Palmer School of Chiropractic was graduating almost 75% of the world's chiropractors. That's 60 years, 60 plus years of Black people not even able to get in the game. That's discrimination. That is racism. And people have a hard time with that. And that goes into the whole white fragility on the concept. But we have to be willing to look at our past, our history, and see where we made mistakes, and then be able to remedy it, right? For making improvements. We do the same thing in our businesses, do we not? Right? I'll do, we have a weekly meeting, right? Weekly meeting, a quarterly meeting, an annual meeting. And what are we doing? We're looking at the numbers, right? We're looking at the numbers. We're telling stories, telling testimonials. We're saying, hey, this is where this went wrong. This is where we could get better. We're constantly doing that in our businesses. Most of us are doing that in our relationships with our communication. But for whatever reason, it seems like chiropractic profession doesn't want to do it. Anytime, and by the way, I've been called an opportunist. I've been talking about this since I've been in school and I first started noticing it. Right. I posted one of my talks that I did. I had, my Talk the Tick talk, addressed a little bit of it, but I talked a little bit more in a talk I did in 2014 called BJ's Black. But I started noticing this in chiropractic school, right? 2010, I started Life Chiropractic College West. Life Chiropractic College West has a seminar every Friday seminar. I was in school for 12 quarters. I graduated in 12 quarters. That's 120 seminars. 120 seminars at my school. Never saw one black chiropractic speaker. I went to 200 plus, right? With 2010 to 2018. I mean, some people say seminar junkie. I was at a lot of freaking seminars, whether it was technique, whether it was philosophy, whether it was the big gatherings. From 2010 to 2018, no black speakers. But it doesn't stop there. At school at Life Chiropractic College West from 2010 to 2013, there was no black instructors. There's no black faculty. There's no black admin. There was no black board members. There was only 3 other black students in a school of 350. And so at some point I was like, I moved from a town in Southern California that doesn't have a huge black population. I live in Oakland, California now, which is one of the most diverse cities, I believe, in the country. But even coming from this smaller town, Hemet, California, with a larger, definitely larger proportion of white people, I was still like, what the fuck is going on here? I had no idea chiropractic was so white. And then I had to learn that not only was it white, it's also anti-black. Yeah, I said anti-black. It's anti-black in its history. And you could go on to say it's anti-black now. Why else would you not have any representation amongst your stages, amongst your boards, amongst your faculty, amongst your, and maybe you say, oh, it's getting better and we're trying now. But you're talking about a long history of systemic racism and white supremacy. So I started noticing it as a student. And now, I think it's becoming very apparent that when you look at the numbers, chiropractic is the least diverse health profession in the entire United States. And that's 20 plus health professions. 87% white, right? 1 to 2% black. And I don't know what the other percentages are. That's by design. And that's what people don't understand. They think, well, that's probably because there's less black people applying to be the chiropractic school, or there's less whatever it is. But you have to understand, if you set up your system to not admit, isn't it crazy that the first adjustment happened to an African-American who probably could have been one of the best chiropractors in the world, talk about a healing testimony, but wasn't allowed to attend? So we have to be able to look at these things, feel these things, and embrace our shadow. And often we neglect it. We don't want to feel it. And we want to talk about equality. And I do want to talk about the difference between equality and equity, but I've been talking for a while. I'm going to have you come in here.
Yeah, I think that you've definitely opened the eyes and the ears and the hearts. And I know that that's what I was going after. And it wasn't about me being heard. I mean, I've done hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of interviews up to this point in my career doing what I do. And I think this might be one of the most poignant interviews I've ever done, just because the topic isn't my typical flow. Like I told you, like from the jump, I was like, this isn't about me being heard. It's about you sharing your view and your vision. And I think one of the things that we have to talk about, and just being like complete with the conversation of the topics, is what are solutions? Like, how can we get to the point where this starts to become something of less of a a topic we don't talk about and something that we acknowledge more? But what's it going to take us to get this to become more of a solution-oriented understanding now, and to where you're said, hey, it's starting to change. Well, it's 2020, man. Like we're 20 years into the 2000s, and you're talking about this coming into like 1954. So we've had a long time. And you even gave me like the lineage of the historical markers in the next decade, the next decade, the next decade. And I think that those are things that, even somebody that is highly aware, I'm not aware of. So I think, what did I say early on before we even jumped on this? I sent you a message. I'm here to learn, man. And I think that that's something that people need to understand too, is it's not about whether they agree or disagree. It's what can you learn and how can you become more informed? And I think the things that we're talking about are things that they'll never cover on mainstream media. they'll never have this conversation. And I think that that's what makes us so unique for what we do is we are pirate radio. We are like rebel journalists. We do stand for something, and that's to share the chiropractic truth. And if that's what I do is share the chiropractic truth, then this is a truth in chiropractic that needs to be shared. Whether people think that this is something that they feel like warm and fuzzies about, or whether they become a little bit more clear on what is actually going on and why our country is doing what it's doing right now. And it's a microcosm of chiropractic, but it's a macrocosm of what's happening right now in our nation. Yeah. And I think just being fair to, the voice that you carry, I fell in love with what you did from day one. When I first heard about you, I was like, man, I have to get this guy on our show. When I first got to Oakland, the first thing I said is I got to go see Brett's clinic. So right away, I had like this affinity with the movement that you were doing. I love the fact that you were training chiropractors. You were teaching people how to stay fit within the practicing of chiropractic. You were becoming a beacon of truth and for relevance for a whole generation that's growing up now with a new wave of understanding what it is to have culture in chiropractic.
Right.
So right away, I was instantly drawn to you, and I was like, hey, if anybody's going to open up a topic with me to talk to the public about chiropractic and what it means for him to be somebody that has a voice that needs to have a platform to share this on, I was like, what could I do with my platform to offer to giving a voice to Brett Jones to say, hey, man, I don't know what you know. I don't feel like you feel. But maybe you can share stuff with people that they will now understand where chiropractic came from historically, where we are today, and what solutions we can do to make, if we can say for less of a better terminology, a course correction. What can we do to correct the course that we're on now to get more inclusion and to, celebrate the idea that chiropractic is multicultural now. And we are, I think, as they say, you have to get to a tipping point. And if you're saying that 73% are of white Caucasian descent, now I believe we're at the tipping point. We're at the course correction of where this becomes more of a multicultural practice, and it becomes something that maybe stands for what you're talking about today.
You've made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession. This week's episode is brought to you by Imaging Services, Chiro Moguls, Mahalo Wellness, McCaffrey's Clinical Mentoring, Local Gold, Chiro Health USA, The Goodman Factor, Chiropractic Rocks, Winner's Edge, Accident Records, Chiro Tax Pro, Full Script, your online dispensary, and Digital Hustle. Let's hustle!
87%. 87%. Fuck, it's crazy. So let's get back into it. One is I want people to know that I love chiropractic, and I'm having this conversation because I want to see chiropractic evolve. That is this. And so sometimes I think when people hear me talk and hear me bring some of these things to the surface, that they feel like I'm trying to destroy chiropractic. That's not the truth. I'm actually trying to help it build. Chiropractic has been stagnant. So I believe there's been two main things that have held chiropractic back. It's been the infighting amongst techniques and philosophies, right? Mechanistic versus vitalistic, and then you name the freaking technique, more subtle tonal techniques versus, deeper osseous techniques or more structural techniques and correction techniques versus, again, more of free flow, innate techniques. So, and they always, again, they see the two sides of something and feel the need to battle. And I believe the evolution will be that you see the different sides of things and you have a need to understand, appreciate, and know that because somebody else in the spectrum of chiropractic is doing something different, it allows you to do what you do. And you can grow together. So I want to talk, one, I love chiropractic. Two, I want to address that, I'm actually grateful that people are listening a little bit more at this stage of my career. It's my 7th year as a chiropractor and a chiropractic business owner. And so I think a lot of times what happens is like if somebody brings these conversations to the table, they want to say, oh, you're just complaining. That's not the case. I'm not just complaining. I've actually, I was $1 million practice within 5 years. We'll break $1 million again, even with coronavirus and the shelter in places. And by the way, Bay Area is one of the most hardcore shelter places in the country right now. So I'm not just complaining. It's not like and not that I haven't experienced a lot of what it means to be a Black chiropractor. Right. I believe, there's a couple others, Billy D's probably one of them, have faced more adversity in my rising than a good majority of people. And a lot of it was actually just in regards to my style, right? People want to talk about my style of adjusting. By the way, I'm Black. I don't know if you saw that. I got tattoos, I got a nose piercing, I got a few different things, and I grew up in a certain area. My style is an expression of who I am, right? So people, again, here's a hole right here, a white supremacy to technique. Name another Black, an African American, a Black person who's created a technique. But they want you to adjust like a Gonstead, right? Not African American. Doesn't have the same cultural background. Didn't listen to the same music. And so, so I've had a lot of shit talk about my style when they probably should be focusing on the results, right? I think that's what we all need to be focusing on, is on the results, because there's multiple ways to get there to those results. But what's your intentions? What's your why? What's your results? That's what matters. But when you want to talk about my style, then to me, that's a form of discrimination often, because you're judging something you don't know. And that happens in a lot of different places. We need to first seek to understand before judging what we don't know. So with that said, kind of one of the biggest ahas that I've had during this experience, and also actually I'll start here. A lot of people don't understand why there are protests happening. Right? Because they're looking at George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery as singular incidents, and only thinking about this is about police brutality. This is not about police brutality. This is years, right? Years of being treated unfairly, unjustly, in a variety of spectrums, and living in systems, again, designed for white supremacy. Systemic racism, putting you at a disadvantage right now in America, right now in 2020, right? A Black female doing the same job as a white male makes 60%. Right now in America. That means my little girl, who has the same similar coloring to me, right now will need to work 1.4 times as hard as a white male counterpart to have a similar income. That's not fair. And that's only a piece of it, right? The incarcerations are way higher, but the charges are way higher for the same crime of the Black male, right? And then you go into all the disparities that you have with where people are living, their ability to even own homes for a long time due to Jim Crow laws and all these other things. But anyway, we need to acknowledge, one, that there's been an uneven playing field. And that's what people understand. It's been an uneven playing field, meaning that we often have to work way harder to get the same level of success and achievement, right? Right now, I see people, right, getting opportunities that have accomplished half of what I've accomplished in the chiropractic profession, right? Why is that? Because they don't like what I talk about. They don't like that I bring up shadow work. They don't like, I don't know what the fuck it is. But again, why are most of these chiropractic seminars white? Because that's the communities that they hang out in, right? You hang out in mainly white male conservatives, by the way. So you have your old boys club, right? All these white male fraternities, right, within chiropractic that promote other white people. And then they say, oh, I don't know any Black chiropractic speakers. Well, that's because you don't hang out in any Black circles, homie, and you haven't been looking for it, right? I made a post just last week. Oh, you don't know any Black speakers? Here's 88 Black chiropractic speakers that are speaking, right? Usually at different health events because they're not welcome or invited to the other chiropractic events. It ain't for them. And that's where we've been making a mistake. So one of the ways we make a mistake is in the infighting. The other one is lack of diversity. Let me tell you why diversity and representation matters. Since I've had this the YouTube and the different social media channels, I've had at least 100 Black either high school or college students send me a message saying, hey, because of you, I can see myself being a chiropractor. What we've missed the boat on is thinking that the message has to be communicated a similar way, often a vanilla way. And what that does is you just keep seeing the same amount of people. And that's why we've been the 2 to 10% of the population for as long as we've been. You want to grow chiropractic, diversify chiropractic in its message. Get different representation of all different types of people. That way they can speak into their communities.
Well, there's a lot that you shared there that brings up some ideas for me to share too. I went to this past year, people probably consider me kind of just like you, a seminar junkie. They'd be like, damn, this guy's everywhere. How does he like make it to this place and this place? And gosh, he works hard. And why does he do what he does? And people are very, curious about me too. And you know what? I don't get many stages either. So me not being a chiropractor, people kind of look at me as kind of like this satellite like entity that just keeps on sharing their stories. Like, they're like, well, why does he do it? Well, my job is to educate the public on what chiropractic is. And as I heard the old boys, as you mentioned, one of their mantras was tell the story, tell the story, tell the story. And I'm like, well, shit, I have like free range to like this medium that's called the internet. And I have this free range to brand that I created that me and my team have painstakingly like hit the road sharing the chiropractic story with. And that's something that makes us very unique in this space. And sometimes people wonder why I do what I do. And once again, it's to share the chiropractic story. So today's interview with you is sharing the chiropractic story from your position. And it's to share the chiropractic story from an idea I didn't know. But I'm going to share with you right now something that I experienced earlier this year going to a seminar when things were like still like, hot and heavy with going to like events. I went to Grant Cardone's 10X Growth Con out in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. And my favorite speaker of the whole weekend was Shaquille O'Neal. And Shaquille O'Neal did something really important for people to know about is he got in network with a brand that most of you probably don't know about. It's called Starbucks. Well, what Shaquille did is he said, hey, I'm going to bring Starbucks to the inner cities. Mm-hmm. And what he started doing is looking for predominantly Black areas. And he's like, I'm going to bring in different things that Black people will like. And I'm going to open up Starbucks and we're going to bring this type of brand into the inner cities. And my vision all along was, I grew up in an area that was predominantly Mexican kids and Black families and Mexican families. And I was like the poor white family in the neighborhood. And so I see it from a different perspective. And I was like, well, what can we do to bring chiropractic to these inner cities? Mm-hmm. What can we do to take Shaquille's idea with Starbucks and bring health and wellness to the inner city? And that's what you're saying is we need to change the motivation. We need to change the conversation into the motivation to start taking care of people that are underserved as it is. And if we want to change the direction of healthcare, let's talk about even playing fields. Chiropractic, even though you're saying it was white supremacy, for the longest time, they were still butting heads with the agenda of the medical system because they did stuff differently. And there was never really a level playing field for the chiropractor versus the medical industry. So once they started taking insurance and it started to get a little bit different, then they said, hey, we're going to start taking more back. We're going to start taking more back. And then the chiropractors, well, we have to go to cash now. So the whole conversation between like level playing field was never really level for the chiropractic profession versus the medical arena. And now you're taking this idea of saying, hey, how can we help more people? How can we get a healthier culture? Well, there's this huge thing with this virus thing. I don't know if you guys have been watching this, but they're telling people that they have to start doing things that might not go towards the tenets of their freedoms. So now we need to change the conversation, like you mentioned, and we need to change it to how can we get to the inner cities, and not just the inner cities of people that are of different skin tones, but how can we get to the inner cities of the people that grew up how I did? Mm-hmm. Like I didn't have access to good medical systems. I had to go to the drop-in clinics, I didn't have insurance. I've never had health insurance. So when people want to talk about like, will my insurance cover chiropractic? Well, I sure as hell hope so. People ask me that all the time. Will it cover it? I go, I don't know. Benefits are kind of weird. We'll call and find out for you though.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the conversation is evolving now. And you being on with me today, dude, you've opened up so much of up here for me and so much of right here for me. And I hope that anybody that's watching this sees two guys that are highly educated, that are doing things for the right reasons, that are following a path that they believe in, that are supporting this profession of chiropractic. And I think that anybody watching right now, if you guys are finding value from this, hashtag value in the comments. If you guys are thinking that other people need to hear what we're talking about today, hit the share button. If you guys love what we're talking about, hit that love button, and just be considerate to us for, once again, exposing ourselves on topics that a lot of people might not be able to talk about because they don't know how to actually bridge that gap and say, hey, Brett, let's have your voice heard today. Because I think that right now, it's now more than ever, we need to realize that we're more alike than we are different.
Yep. So yeah, thank you. I'd love to get into one of the big ahas in all this is the difference between equality and equity.
Yeah, let's hit it.
Right? So I feel like I would say for the most part, the majority of the profession values equality. Meaning that they might be non-racist. And there's also a difference between non-racist and anti-racist, right? So a non-racist is more on the equality spectrum, meaning that you do not actively discriminate, right? And so as long as the schools are not actively discriminating and that there's an equal opportunity for different ethnicities to attend, then you're doing enough. Right? As long as there's an equal opportunity for different ethnicities and cultures to attend a seminar, that you're doing enough. I would say right now it's not. It's not enough. Angela Davis says it's no longer enough to be non-racist. You need to be anti-racist. This anti-racist is actively taking steps to either call out racism and racist behavior, and dismantle the systems that have been set up, again, in white supremacy. It's an active process. And this is the same thing as equity. If we can acknowledge that the chiropractic profession is set up in white supremacy and racism by discriminating Black people to attend the major school, and others, by the way, then you have to take actions to remedy that. Right. And so it is not enough for, again, I'm not all 100% aware of what the different percentages are for Latinx population versus your Asian and Pacific Islander populations in chiropractic. But again, if 86 to 87% is white, doesn't leave a lot for the rest of the population. So with that said, 3 steps to remedy, right? Which you can also call reparations, right? People have, again, white fragility has a problem with the term reparation. Reparation is repairing the fucking damage that you've done. And you have to be willing to admit that you've done damage. I mean, oh, it wasn't me, right? It wasn't me, it was my ancestor. Oh, it wasn't even my ancestor. It was just the people that came before me. But here's why it matters. If we can come to the agreement that a more diverse and vibrant chiropractic profession would serve a more diverse and vibrant population of people, and that it would bring an increase in quality and excellence to what we offer, then we need to be able to do the work to make it happen. I would love to see the chiropractic profession be the most diverse health profession in the United States. And I believe by doing so, it would also become the most excellent. And in order to do that, we can no longer just point the finger at the other side, that we do need to unite on common values, on a common mission, for a common purpose. I believe that the majority of chiropractors do want to help people, and they do care, and they often want to do it by natural means. Beautiful. I understand there's a variety of techniques to make that happen. I understand that some are going to be more treatment model and some are going to be more innate healing subluxation model. But if you're moving towards the same common values with the same common purpose and the same common mission, we can support one another in doing that. And so the 3-step process to helping the chiropractic profession be more diverse, I believe number 1 is representation. Representation. We need more ethnicities represented closer to what the U.S. population is. It's not even right now, by the way, it's sad that it's not even close to what the actual chiropractic profession is. Meaning that even if black chiropractors currently are 1% to 2%, you don't even see that representation in any of the places. Seminars, organizations, associations, CCE, NBCE, all the schools, the boards, you're not even going to see 1% or 2% in that. But I'm saying I want it closer to what the actual U.S. population is. I would love to see the black representation be closer to 10% and then lead the way for the rest of the healing professions to move towards, right? So we need representation along all of the leadership positions, right? From then representation, we'll get more participation, meaning that you need more ethnicity and diversity in your chiropractic school populations. It means that you actively have to be marketing to those specific populations and creating reparations, right, for what has historically been white supremacy and systemic racism. 3 is education. So we need representation, we need participation, and then you need education. So care and education for the people that we're going to serve. If you have more representation at leadership positions that represents more diversity, and then you got more participation with diversity as chiropractic school could becoming chiropractors, then you can better serve diverse populations and educate diverse populations. Because one is delivering the care, the other one is delivering the innate healing principle. So those are the 3 steps to bring equity and justice to the chiropractic profession. And by doing so, I do believe that's how we shift from being, the I don't know, whatever you want to call it, the second, leading healthcare profession in the United States to becoming a more excellent profession. And I do think we could transition into number 1. I think you're going to see medical systems start crumbling in a variety of ways if they don't switch up their game too. They're run by business administrators instead of the doctors, and they're run by pharmaceutical companies, which again, the medical doctors are upset themselves. And so right now is a great opportunity with space, right? Not just to pivot, but to heal and evolve.
Well said. I think that the more that people understand this, once again, that it's coming from somebody that is working very hard to support chiropractic. And from both of us, me being a non-chiropractor and you being a practicing chiropractor, we can talk about some pretty important things that most people wouldn't be able to have conversations on. So I thank you for, opening up my eyes once again and sharing how we can have a solution now. I think everybody wants to talk, like we've always said, they want to talk rah. Well, where's the meat and potatoes? Where's the substance? And I believe that you gave plenty of substance today for people to walk away with and to say, I'm going to watch that thing 10 times. Mm-hmm. That's going to be the most viewed Chiro Hustle ever, because those 2 guys right there, they let the people hear what needs to happen for all healing. Mm-hmm. I mean, like I said earlier, we're in a niche arena with chiropractic, but this is a universal language that our culture needs healing from. And if we can't see that right now, I haven't watched a TV since 3 months ago, but I know that what's happening in our country is there's a lot of disarray, and there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of misinformation. And honestly, that's why I clung to chiropractic when I did, is because I saw something of truth. Mm-hmm. I saw something that could set people free. I saw something that would help with what I understood back, 11 years ago, was we were in a medical tyranny. They were saying that I had to go and get a certain thing done to me in order to be cataloged in a medical system. I'm like, I don't believe in that. Mm-hmm. I didn't grow up like that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just be me, and I'm not going to sign up for health insurance because I don't want to be a part of that system, because I don't believe in that system. Right. So even there, it was systematic for somebody that didn't believe in a system, that you had to start doing something. Otherwise you weren't viable. and you wouldn't get tax breaks and you wouldn't get kickbacks. I'm like, well, cool. I'm just going to live my life and I'm not going to depend on that type of system. I'm gonna go full in with this healing art, which is called chiropractic. I'm gonna research it. I'm gonna find out things. Like you opened my eyes to things. I'm a documentarian, so you opened my eyes to things I was unaware of. And you could just think about my first film, Chiropractic the documentary, how I could have made it better had I known some of the things that you shared with me today. You know, as I became more influential for this chiropractic message, people listen to what I do. Because like you were saying earlier, the narrative was this headbutting of technique and school and ideology. And what I saw is the chiropractic profession was in such a confused state that the keys to the kingdom were over there on the wall. And I just went and grabbed them and I said, you know what? I'm just going to start telling the chiropractic story the way I think people need to hear it. Because even as you tell me that the medical industry is starting to have fractures in it, yeah, because you have people that are highly educated that are doctors and they're being mandated to treat a certain way. And that's not congruent with what they think that they should be doing as providers.
Right, based on business moves. Yep.
But the chiropractor has always stood on that platform of saying no drugs, no surgery, F you. So I still think that chiropractic does have the opportunity to lead the way for the health industry of this nation. And I believe since day one that chiropractic has an ability to turn the course of reality for people to start being more self-reliant and to care more about what's inside of them rather than what's on the outside of them. Right. And I've always said that chiropractic is all about, you know, removing the interference of the body to where it can express natural. And I believe that that's where we need to go back to with the narrative of, I think it was about 4 years ago, I was asked to speak at this Mile High Philosophy Night, and my talk was called Unity Through Diversity. And it wasn't built on a talk of, you know, race, or it wasn't based on color. It was about technique. And I was like, y'all do it the same, just different. And everything has an outcome, which is when you perform the adjustment or the correction, the body's going to be a better version of itself because you did it with your best skill set. And that's really what I believe in chiropractic for, is it delivers care to people based on their best skill set. Like you said, whether either it's mechanistic, whether it's vitalistic, if it's an innate approach or if it's a medical skewed approach. What the chiropractor does though, is they follow that Hippocratic oath that all doctors should be following, is do no harm, and to create the best expression of outcome. And that's why you're saying the medical industry is even going against the pharmaceutical industry right now, because the medical people providing are like, I don't believe in that for my family. Why would I do that to other people's families? So we have an important conversation we've had today. What's the evolution and the dream for chiropractic? Where do you see it going?
I think it's exactly that. You know, with the 3 steps, I see us as being able to have conversations. So what happens is you often see, right, represented that if you have 2 different viewpoints, it needs to be a debate. Right. And
we've debated nothing.
Right. That doesn't really make any sense. You don't have to debate. You can have a need to understand and still choose to do something differently. And I think people have a hard time with that I would rather not understand you and just disagree with you instead of, oh, I can understand where you're coming from. I choose to do it this way, but at least I have an understanding. And if I understand, I can care. If I don't understand, then I can demonize you or vilify you, right? And then create separation. And again, that has been the tactics of the levels of thinking. Again, so if you're a conservative, you think your party's superior, and that's not true. If you're a Democrat, you think your party's superior, and that's not true. It's a different viewpoint and different perspective, right? I would love to see the bipartisan party like crumble, and I think it's actually getting close to happening. But when it comes to chiropractic, and the dream for chiropractic, again, is a more diverse, a more vibrant, a more loving, a more caring profession that's seeing a larger amount of people. And an action step for people that are loving this conversation and or want to learn more is there was a group that was started last week called Chiropractors for Justice. And so those 3 main points that I just talked about, we are actively every single day working on them. And so already having a few different talks with, some different seminar people. We're going to be building a platform that if you are part of a marginalized group, that is needing representation. We're going to build a platform where we can highlight, a variety of different cultures and ethnic backgrounds and sexual preference and orientation, because that's a big part of this too, on what your skill sets are, what areas of expertise you have, a video of you speaking and or presenting. And that way, a lot of these events that are lacking diversity, we can send them the link to the platform. Be like, hey, if you're looking for a diverse array of speakers, check out a list. You pick which ones you want. Because I don't want to keep hearing, sorry, I don't know any. That's bullshit. And so we'll be working on that. We'll be working on bringing that similar diversity to different boards and associations, organizations, schooling systems, presidents, teachers, faculty, all of it. So we're basically working through that, representation, participation, education. And so if you want to be active, please do. And for those that do operate, there's a lot of the country that do operate on a little bit of that fear tone, and you really, really value medical freedom. I want you to think about this. I went to a couple of the protests during coronavirus in regards to medical freedom, right? 99 point, I don't know what percent white people. Protests were weak, man. They were weak. You know who knows how to protest? The LGBTQIA community know how to fucking protest. And the black community knows how to fucking protest. So if you are somebody that values your medical freedoms, and there ever comes that time where they're really being stripped away, not just needing to wear a face mask, but really being stripped away, I'll tell you who you're going to want at your fucking protest. That's why representation matters. And that's why you want to diversify as quick as you can, because the more black, brown, and queer people you get at your protest, the better, the more likely you are to get your needs met. Because we know pain, we know struggle, we know challenge, and we got a whole different fucking energy that can come in there. And when you've lived a privileged life with a lot of advantages, it can often, you ain't got much to fight for, or you don't have the same fight. And so you're going to want your brothers and sisters of color, and you're going to want your brothers and sisters and everything in between to be there. And so when it comes that time, which it may, that's why I think we need to work on diversity. One of the reasons we need to work on diversity right now, because it's important so that we can continue to live the life that we want to live in connection and love and health and healing and an evolution of consciousness.
Brett Jones, thank you for being my guest today. This is one for the record books, and just like in our popular culture that we live in today, please comment, like, or share this. If you found some value in this, share it for your audience to hear what we discussed today. And thank you for not debating with me.
Welcome. Thanks for listening. Mm-hmm.
I think we have more in common than most people know, and we both believe in the same future for chiropractic, as more people need to get checked and adjusted. And with that being said, is there anything I didn't ask you today that you'd like to share with our audience?
I think we did a great job. Check out Chiropractors for Justice. Also get to a Kairos training culture training camp near you. They're back in action. We got one coming up in Florida here in July, and then Atlanta in July, and then in the Bay Area in the first week of August. So we'd love to train with you and sweat with you, maybe cry with you, laugh with you, love with you. Yeah, thanks for checking this out. Thanks for being open to listening.
Thank you for being my guest today. And I'm going to close out by saying you guys are just one story away. Keep hustling. I'll see you guys in the next one.
Thank you for listening to Chiro Hustle Live. Don't forget to subscribe and check back next week to continue hustling.